None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Goethe. In a couple days, we'll be celebrating the 4th of July, Independence Day here in America, where most of us still think we're free. Now, that is what made America great at one time. We were the greatest country in the world because of our freedoms. A lot of countries have more resources than us, and the only reason why they're not flourishing is because they don't have any freedoms. Now in America, our freedoms have been slowly eroding, and it's getting really bad now, where we are slaves. The problem we have for most people is we don't see the bars. That's why it's a worse form of enslavement. Because when you don't see the bars, you don't think you have to escape. You become complacent, apathetic. If more people realize that we were slaves, that we have corporations running everything, these entities, these soulless entities that have immortality, if we could ever wake up to this reality, maybe we could do something about it. But when you stop to think about it, it's overwhelming, isn't it? That's why I've said so many times, the ultimate solution to get us out of the hell we're in, so we won't be slaves anymore, is a bottom-up solution. We've got to change the collective mentality. Otherwise, things will never change. As long as we have the wrong mentality, we're still going to prey upon ourselves. We're still going to compete for resources on an abundant planet. We're still going to have the sickest of us exploiting the sickness in us. That's why I'm a broken record. I know there's an ultimate solution to get us out of this mess that we're in. And it's sad to see so many people so afraid. We're supposed to be the land of the brave. Most Americans aren't brave. We're chickens. We're afraid to accept the truth. The great documentary that came out by the 1,500 architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth came out at the end of their documentary. If you haven't seen it, you got to watch this documentary. At the end of it, they question themselves, why can't people accept the evidence we're submitting? It's foolproof. We know what happened. That was a false flag. 9/11 was a false flag designed to take away our freedoms. And they turned to a bunch of psychologists, and I even did a video, I'll put a link down below, where I took a clip from that section, about a 17-minute clip, where they interviewed all these psychologists, and they all explained how people are afraid to accept the truth. It's scary to know that the psychopaths are running the asylum. It's scary to even ponder the idea that this could be a twilight zone. And yet I've seen a lot of twilight zones, probably every one of them. Don't remember most of them probably, but the one we live in now is the worst one ever. This is the worst twilight zone we could ever imagine. We live at a time right now where the governments know everything about us, and we don't know anything about them. It's okay for them to have secrecy and privacy, but not for us. And that's where we're headed. We're headed to a police state. Remember, Saul Alinsky had this three-legged stool analogy to explain the situation. He said you have the government and the big corporations or big money, and then the individuals. And if the individuals aren't organized, these other two are going to get organized, and they're going to control us. Well, guess what? Most governments are corporations. Cities are corporations. States are corporations. They're entities, soulless entities. And there's only about a dozen of them, not including the actual countries, that are trying to control every aspect of our lives, our food and everything else. That's why we're in the mess we're in. The people who run everything know that. They know they can't control a healthy populace. They got to keep us sick. That's why our experts aren't our experts. Doctors don't know anything about what causes the disease and what to do for it. Nutritionists don't know anything about food. That's why there's so much confusion on this subject. We have to become our own expert, my friends. We've got to prove this to ourselves, what it's going to take to get healthy, because it's a bottom-up solution. each and every one of us has a responsibility so that we can gain back our freedom. And that responsibility is to be the best that you can be. When all of us can do that, or at least enough to get to the tipping point, that 100th monkey, once we get to that stage, then things will start changing because we'll have a different mentality. Once we get a majority of us doing this, we'll have a collective mentality that's not going to want to prey upon itself. And then if we will have any type of government at all, the government will be there to do what it's supposed to do, serve us, instead of flip things around and make us their servants. So how do we deal with what we got right now? I have no real good solutions for downstream solutions now. I got to pause for a second because I'm 2, 3, 6, 9. Okay, I didn't know how many there were before. I'm watching the bike path over here, and you'll probably be able to see them when they're over there. They're right over there now. But there's a group of 9 people with a flag. And when I first saw that, I had seen 2 more people within 5 minutes carrying a flag. And I wish I could yell at them because I want to get them to come over here and say, hey, you guys really think you're free? Do you not know that you're enslaved? John Adams, the first vice president of our country and the second president of our country, said that there's 2 ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by the sword, the other is by debt, and that's what we are. We're debt slaves. If you pay 25% income tax, for example, just on income tax alone, that would be 1/4 of your income. 12 months, that's 3 months, so that means 3 months out of the year you're working for someone else. And guess where that income tax money goes? It goes to pay the debt on the money that was loaned to us, that we're supposed to be printing. So we could change a lot right now if we could take back control of the money. But how do we change the laws when we got corrupt politicians? What can we do? It boggles my mind that so many people are aware that we have a foreign corporation, a private corporation, printing our money and charging us interest for it and making us a debt slave. And that's what they're doing all around the world. And things aren't changing because right now we're at war with the countries that don't want to play that money game. And it's no different than the century before, where they didn't want countries like Germany and Japan to play that game. Same thing happened to Gaddafi. Every country that stops letting someone else print their money, they become affluent. They prosper. Why? Because we live on an abundant planet. But we have sick people who print our money, charge us interest for it, and in effect are siphoning off all the profits. When the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, today that dollar is worth about 4 cents by design to keep us poor. I've said this before, but if you look at the planet, about half the planet are third world countries. There's no middle class whatsoever. The other countries that have a middle class, that middle class has always got to be cold. Last century, democide, Google that if you're not familiar with it, the University of Hawaii pushed a pencil to it and they came up with a figure of 262 million people were murdered during peacetime. Now some of those numbers are wrong because they threw in those bogus numbers during World War II that don't belong in there. And you know I've talked about that enough times. But this just goes back to our belief system. We don't know history. History repeats itself for a reason. But we could change that, my friends. Remember, it's a bottom-up solution. If we can get enough people to correct the fall of mankind so that they become connected and become an example for the rest of us, if we reach that 100th monkey, the tipping point, and then everyone starts doing it, this planet could transform so fast. It'd be fascinating to see what type of government system we'd have in the future. I guarantee you, if we could hit the tipping point in 10 years, we wouldn't recognize this planet. It'd be much better. Did y'all see the flags? I should have paid attention to them and pointed at them. I think you guys can see that. There's a bike on the hill right now. They probably went over that. But anyway, in a couple days, there's going to be another day of illusion, thinking that we're free. We got our independence. We never broke away. Virtually every country on this planet is being controlled and manipulated by a small group of people. Thank you. And they're making us sick. They're keeping us sick. So the solution, the ultimate solution, is for you guys is to play your role. If you don't know anything about what I'm talking about, this might be the very first video you've watched, look down in the description box of my video and you'll see a playlist to what's called a solid food vacation. And what you can do is you can test an idea as time has come by taking this solid food vacation. And what you'll do within a very short period of time is you'll go through a transformation you won't believe, especially if you have a lot of problems. Now, some of y'all have a whole lot of problems and you might be going through this and saying, I'm still not feeling any better. What's going on? Well, this is how it can get complicated. Sometimes you have to feel worse before you get better, and also satisfying one group of needs is not enough, and that's what the solid food vacation mainly addresses. It corrects 5 main dietary mistakes. But if your body's been damaged somehow, then you have another group of needs you've got to satisfy to help you get healthy. And you may have permanent damage. You may never be able to achieve the type of health that you deserve. Or it may take years for you to reverse what you got. But that's where you play a role to figure out what type of individual damage you have, to figure out how you got to tweak this. But the thing I like the most about the solid food vacation is it's about 10 times faster than if we just adopt a raw food diet. Now that works, it just takes longer, and it's harder because you're still eating. As long as you're eating, you're going to be tempted to eat the wrong thing. That's why Tolstoy said that there is a first step to get to the second step of a 2-story house. Got all these steps, you got to start at the first step, and that's self-control. And most of us lack that if we've been eating the wrong food, because the wrong food is very addictive. It creates a false hunger, a morbid sensation in our stomach, when it should be a watering of the throat. So there's several things you want to do to play your role when you go on a solid food vacation. You want to flush everything out, bump up your biophotons, reset the feedback system so you don't have that hunger spell anymore. And then once you realize what that has done for you, you're going to want to share that with everybody, and you will, and you'll have your bubble busted or bursted, or however that expression goes, because you're going to be all excited, and everyone else is going to say, oh, that works for you, but not for me. I could never do that. You got so much discipline and willpower. Well, go for the people who are really, really sick. And you're still going to find people struggling with their addictions and then denial. That's why Tolstoy emphasized the first step. Now, a lot of people don't know this about Tolstoy. He wrote War and Peace, Anna Karenina. He was known as a writer, but he wanted to be known for his religious views. He actually wanted to create a whole new religion because he saw so many flaws in the system that we have. And he explained how the Christians, for example, focus on the higher values, the higher virtues, and they ignore the lower virtues. And the lower virtue is the first step: self-control, self-renunciation. If you haven't read Tolstoy's First Step, I'll put a link down below to a video I did called The First Step to Paradise, where I condensed his 25-page essay into like 650 words or so. I condensed it down. I just played my tape recorder on it. And you'll get an understanding of where Tolstoy's coming from, to help you understand why it's so important that if you're struggling with those higher virtues, you got to focus on those lower virtues. And again, that's what so many of us do. And then you say, well, look at my higher virtues. Look what I'm doing. I'm doing all these good things. But you're not paying attention to the lower virtues. And what does that mean? It means you're disconnected. It means you're part of the problem. It means you're part of the collective consciousness. Now, when you look at how everyone behaves, a lot of people are doing pretty good despite the fact they're disconnected. But nonetheless, that still pulls the collective consciousness down, even though you're a good person and you're doing good things. So that's not enough. You got to play your role. You got to get healthy, because we are all one. what you do to yourself affects everyone else. And yes, I'm eating horrible food, but look what I'm doing. I'm treating people really nice. But I'm not treating myself nice. So you have to put yourself as number one. If you really care about other people and you really want to do a good job and help other people, you've got to be the best that you can be. How can you serve the Lord when your body's been defiled? If you defile the temple, you'll be destroyed. The temple isn't a church, it's your body, my friends. Again, self-control, self-renunciation. Take the first step. Do a solid food vacation. I guarantee you, my friends, if you haven't done this yet and you do it, you're in for a treat.